Roronoa Zoro can sometimes be very overlooked. And that isn't to say people don't love Zoro, because they do, and he's easily the most popular character in One Piece, second only to Luffy. But when it comes to his actual character, not many people give him the credit he is due. I can't count the number of times I've heard that Zoro is underdeveloped or boring because he has not been sufficiently fleshed out. There's a very common interpretation of Zoro's character that is widely held by One Piece fans that sort of goes like this. Zoro is a cool, serious, badass swordsman who'll do anything that needs to be done to achieve his goal and become the world's strongest swordsman. And that's definitely true, but that only covers the most surface level aspect of his character. That's the only part of Zoro that someone who doesn't properly understand him can see. I initially planned this video to be a massive character analysis for Zoro that covered every aspect of his character, because I truly do think he's in the conversation for most well written in all of One Piece. From Zoro's gradual descent into stoicism and what that means for him, to how Zoro is almost entirely defined by his defeats, to his relationship with Luffy and what that means for both of their characters. There's a lot I could talk about, but today I want to focus on one thing. Something people don't really talk about that I consider to be absolutely crucial to understanding the character of Roronoa Zoro. Let's go right back to the beginning. No, not Shell's Town, we'll get there in a bit. The beginning. Zoro's story begins in Shimotsuki village in the East Blue. We don't know anything about the very early years of his life, but by the time he was 8 years old, he was training at a dojo in Shimotsuki village, and he was already making grand statements proclaiming he would become the strongest swordsman in the world. The only person he couldn't defeat in this dojo was Kuina, the daughter of the dojo's master. After his 2000th defeat against Kuina, he challenged her to a real battle using a real katana, but still, Zoro was completely and utterly defeated. Kuina began to cry because of her perceived disadvantage of being born a woman. Her father drilled into her head the idea that she could never be the strongest because of her gender, and Zoro wasn't having any of this, to the point where he felt disrespected at the fact the girl who had beaten him 2001 times wasn't even confident in her own abilities. How could Zoro become the strongest if he couldn't defeat someone who didn't even consider themselves worthy of trying to become number one? This is where they make the promise that someday one of them will become the greatest swordsman in the world, and this adds even more meaning to Zoro's already existing ambition. That's very important to remember. The origin of Zoro's dream is still unknown, and honestly, it's hard to say what that origin could be. But this is where I'm going to tell you guys to put your tinfoil hats on, because we're going to talk about what it could be, what I think it could be, and you guys feel free to let me know what you guys think it could be in the comment section down below. Now, a lot of you guys might not know this, but One Piece is not my favorite manga. My favorite manga, or fictional story period, is Vagabond, written and illustrated by the greatest of all time, Takehiko Inoue. The main protagonist of Vagabond is Miyamoto Musashi. I'm going to try and not spoil anything, but I'm going to talk about one core aspect of Musashi's character that I think can be applied to Zoro. Musashi's dream is to become invincible under the sun, which is basically the same as Zoro's dream in flashier terms. Of course, Musashi's journey as a whole is absolutely nothing like Zoro's, but with this tinfoil hat on, I am convinced that their dreams have the same origin. You see, Musashi's ambition stems from something quite simple. He was orphaned as a child, neglected by his parents, and so he pursued strength as a means to protect himself in a world of solidarity and isolation. It was a coping mechanism for his loneliness. And this honestly sounds like something that would fit Zoro incredibly well when you consider his character as a whole. We don't know Zoro's parents, but based on the very little we have of his flashback, it's pretty clear that the kid was orphaned, and perhaps he turned to strength or the idea of being the very strongest as a coping mechanism for that loneliness. He was just a child with nobody to protect or take care of him, and so he concluded that he wouldn't need anybody. He would live and survive alone and become the world's strongest swordsman so that he could protect himself without any help needed from anybody else. The promise with Kuina adds onto his already existing ambition and gives it further meaning. Kuina going on to die, making Zoro the only one capable of fulfilling the promise, further adds onto that loneliness. Zoro at the start of the series is very much a lone wolf, and I think he prefers it this way. And I want you to hold on to that thought as we progress through Zoro's life and finally end up here at Shell's Town, where everything changed forever for Zoro. Enter Luffy, possibly the most fitting type of person to befriend Zoro and be his captain. Just like Zoro, Luffy has grand ambitions, even grander than Zoro's dream of becoming the world's strongest swordsman. And the both of them champion their dream, repeatedly stating it over the course of the story and making it an essential aspect of themselves. Not only is Luffy just the perfect person to befriend Zoro, but he gives Zoro an ultimatum. He tells Zoro, these people are planning to kill you. Either you join me or you die. So Zoro kinda didn't have a choice when it came to joining Luffy, and so he submits and agrees to join Luffy under one condition. If Luffy ever gets in the way of his dream, he would make him commit harakiri. Luffy goes on to say that anything else would make him look bad in the context of Zoro's dream, and this is a very important line that is later brought up by Zoro himself following his defeat against Mihawk. He joins Luffy, and for once Zoro has a comrade, someone he can consider a friend, someone who has got his back and vice versa. I appreciate Johnny and Yosaku exist, but I don't think they developed a true friendship with Zoro on this level. And of course at this stage Luffy and Zoro's bond has just formed and they aren't as close as they one day will be, but this is the beginning. And this is where I think Zoro begins to change subconsciously without even noticing it. But before we dive into that, let's talk about Zoro's sheer selflessness. Not just in the context of his friends, but with strangers as well. The entire reason Zoro was tied up when we first met him is because he was protecting a little girl he didn't even know. Despite how cold and emotionless Zoro may seem at times, he does in fact have a very kind heart. Time and time again over the course of the series, we see Zoro's martyr-like tendencies, sacrificing himself for the sake of his crew and, at times, people he doesn't even know. The thing with Zoro is that he just does what he wants to, and a lot of the time what he wants to do is the right thing to do. Roronoa Zoro is a man who lives by a code. One we haven't explicitly been told about within the story, but it is obvious Zoro strongly embodies. The Code of Bushido, a value system deeply rooted in Japanese culture that was especially prominent during the Tokugawa period when samurai were a commonality. There are 8 parts to the Code of Bushido: justice, courage, benevolence, politeness, sincerity, honor, loyalty, and self-control. Zoro embodies the Code of Bushido to a T, but diving deeper into this and explaining every little thing and supporting it with panels from the manga will take a lot of time. If it's something you're interested in seeing, let me know and I'll gladly make a video on it in the future. But just those 8 words, looking at them and thinking of Zoro, I mean it fits, right? Justice, courage, benevolence, politeness, sincerity, honor, loyalty, self-control. I think the only one there that doesn't really fit is probably politeness, but Zoro is pretty polite to anybody that isn't Sanji, I guess. So I think it works pretty well, and if you guys want a separate video where I go into a lot deeper, let me know and I'll make that a priority. Anywho, the most important part of this Bushido conversation is appreciating how Zoro can be someone with a strong sense of justice, courageous enough to uphold that justice, and with such honor that he is willing to risk his life in the process. Zoro would have quite literally died in Shellstown had it not been for Luffy. Helmeppo was planning to execute the guy within 3 days and was not planning at all to stay true to the promise he made with him. Zoro would have never progressed past Shellstown if Luffy didn't step in and offer a hand of assistance. Zoro would have never met Mihawk and never been able to turn his dreams into reality. The events of Shellstown are absolutely integral to understanding Zoro's character, especially since this is the first time we see him. This is the first impression, the first thing Oda gives us for our second most prominent protagonist in this massive story. Sacrifice, ambition, and how those two things can clash. And that brings us on to the next moment I want to talk about. Zoro's almost stupidly reckless, to the point where it can be annoying to read. The man does not respect his body and pushes it to extreme limits. He sort of has a Superman complex, believing he can take on anybody and anything by himself. He refuses to accept help most of the time and suffers alone. Roronoa Zoro does things his own way, and that is the page I want to talk about. The lengths that Zoro goes for Luffy, or just anybody who requires help, is absolutely ridiculous to think about when you also consider the grandness of his dream. Why is Zoro so hell-bent on pushing himself to absurd limits? Zoro's martyr-like tendencies, his sacrificial nature, don't these things pose a problem? Don't they clash with his massive ambitions? How is he to fight and surpass Mihawk if he puts his life on the line for every little thing? Is his life worth so little to him? Well, this is the part of the video that's pretty tough to write for myself, because the thing with how Zoro has been written is that we don't get big sweeping character moments that explicitly characterize and define him. Zoro's a lot more ambiguous than that, and more open to interpretation. Oda characterizes him through very subtle and implicit moments. When it comes to the Superman complex I just mentioned, there are so many ways you can look at it. Perhaps it's Zoro's way of defying Koshiro's words, that humans are fragile. Every step of the way, Zoro has proved he's the furthest thing from fragile. Or perhaps Zoro's Superman complex is what he talks about in Thriller Bark when he fights against Kuma and says, if I can't protect my captain, and by extension the rest of the crew, then my ambition means nothing. If Zoro can't protect what he wants to protect, then he is nothing. Protection. That is what I consider to be the most crucial aspect of Zoro's character that I wanted to discuss today. I think Zoro has grown into a man and into a character who fights to protect, who fights to safeguard. He finds strength in protecting people. Mihawk comments on this himself, saying, when a man of your caliber abandons his pride, it's always for the sake of another. And this is where I believe true strength comes from in the context of Roronoa Zoro's character. The closer he gets to Luffy and the rest of the crew, the stronger he becomes. The more fiercely he wants to safeguard the ones he loves, the stronger he becomes. And this is all supported by the very mechanics of swordsmanship in One Piece, which I think is the most impressive thing of all of this. Koshiro says the strongest sword is a blade that can protect what it wishes to protect and cut what it wishes to cut. And interestingly enough, this ideology is also present in Zoro's prototype. Ryuma had a very similar line to this in Monsters. A battle isn't measured by how much fame you gain through it, but by what you protected. And that is also what I believe will be the deciding factor between Zoro and Mihawk in their final duel. Zoro will be fighting for so much more than just his ambition. He will cling onto life for his loved ones, for the people he wishes to protect and safeguard. He is invigorated and empowered by this safeguarding, by protecting these people, whether it's the Straw Hats or the strangers of the Wano country. Zoro's greatest strength comes from protecting people. And that's why I think Zoro has changed for the better once he joined Luffy in Shellstown. His entire approach to pursuing his ambition was flipped on its head. He was no longer the lone militant searching after Mihawk. He had become the number 2 of a pirate crew that would go on to literally shake the world. He had finally found friendship, camaraderie, people he could love, and he was no longer lonely. The trials and tribulations over the course of this journey would only make him stronger. Every new crewmate, every new friendship, that is another person to be strong for, another person to protect. Zoro at his core isn't just a cool, badass, serious swordsman who'll do anything for his dream. He is a tender, sweet, caring individual with an incredibly kind heart. A man who fights to protect what needs to be protected and cut what needs to be cut. Thank you guys for watching, and let me know if you'd like to see more character analysis on Zoro in the future. That's it for today, guys. Peace.